Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. For any of you that haven't really been following Age of Empires 4 recently, I wanted to make a simple video summarizing a lot of big features added to the game since release. Now, I'm not here to sell you on the game or conversely to argue that AoE2 is better, but I realized I made a lot of videos about AoE4 leading up to its launch, and like a lot of players, was disappointed with it initially. In my case, I moved back to Age of Empires 2 pretty quickly. So far this year though, AoE4 has seen a lot of improvements, so we'll take a look at those as well as why I think if it had been released in its current state, it would have been much better received. To start with the catalyst for this, there's a new preview for the second major update coming to the game, which if you own Steam at least, you can pretty easily opt into. This video is going to look at the highlights from that update and some of the earlier ones over the last few months, which when I counted them turned out to be 10 major changes, and who doesn't love a top 10? Well, apparently this guy, but he doesn't have to watch. Starting off with the first big change, you can now set your color, or if you prefer, go with a random color. It's not quite as fancy as AoE3 letting you actually customize them, but it's a big step forward. Lots of players have a favorite, and if it wasn't blue or red, then you probably weren't getting it the majority of the time previously. The very pedantic side of me though has to correct them that this is much more of a cyan than a teal, but it's a common mistake, and admittedly teal is a fun word to say, so cyan fans will just have to deal with it. Next up, a second new big feature is the random civilization option has now been added. This is great for everyone from new players learning the game or even veterans who are testing their game knowledge. Sometimes you just want to mix it up, and it's a nice basic feature that has now been added. Number 3 is hotkeys are now customizable by creating a new profile under the fully remappable tab. Options include things like jumping to individual barracks, selecting all barracks, and all of those sorts of shortcuts. Likewise, you can ignore the grid pattern and set individual buildings and unit hotkeys to whatever you like and will be easiest for you to remember. For example, putting villagers on A or C instead of Q. I get the sense this was probably a big project behind the scenes, but definitely seems worth it. I also like the warning about hotkey conflicts, but that those conflicts are still allowed to exist, and you can disable the warning. It just puts a small yellow indicator if you map conflicting things to the same hotkey, but for the most part doesn't get in your way as you're trying to map them. The grid system hotkeys and limited remapping were my #1 concern at release last year, and trying to view the game through the eyes of a new player again, I think this would have made the biggest impact early on in how the game felt to play. Number 4 is the camera zoom has been sort of addressed with a new camera mode. They've given the option now of a classic and a panoramic version, and for comparison, here's the maximum zoom as it has been, and here's the new maximum zoom with panoramic mode. You can see it's both further out and also more overhead. Personally, I still think it's a little weird and almost feels like the camera is swinging instead of zooming. Maybe you can see what I mean. I already like the panoramic better, though I still don't think they quite understand what people have been asking for, which is the same camera angle, but more control over how far back you can zoom. Number 5 is you can now suggest your map preference in quick play and ranked. You get multiple maps that you can tell the matchmaking system to avoid, and can even filter by types of maps in case you especially don't like water, choke point, or open maps, etc. Obviously, in a 4v4, you may reach a situation where every map has at least one thumbs down from someone, in which case I assume it just picks from the ones with the least. So it's not strictly a ban system like in AoE2, but I actually like it a little better. A system like this is probably the #1 way to avoid people dropping games early, and while it doesn't completely eliminate that, it's still a good feature and should lead to more people getting the maps they want. Number 6 is a ranked ladder now exists in the game, though it is just for 1v1. This was added a while back, and it's a little different than in other Age games, as instead of an ELO rating, you rank up through tiers of bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and finally conqueror. This has some advantages over a static ELO rating, and gives players a fresh start at the beginning of each season. Because it's still early days, there's a very quickly shifting meta undergoing rebalancing from almost month to month. At number 7, we have the content editor and mods. This was added a few months back, but unfortunately the content editor is not very intuitive, and a lot of work still needs to be done to bring it up to the standard of the rest of the franchise if it's meant for a general audience to use. Even little kids can figure out the basics of previous games editors in a pretty short amount of time, whereas here you basically need a computer science degree to create even a simple map by hand, going through folders and subfolders just to reach basic items. I'm not exaggerating when I say it's obviously meant for developers and not a casual player trying to make their own Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones scenario to play with friends. And I don't want to oversell this as something you can just jump in and use without a lot of tutorials. It does have one very cool feature though, where you can just draw the map you want in a Microsoft Paint sort of interface and it'll generate it for you following your input. Here's my map of Central Europe that I'm inputting, which may not be perfect, but is roughly the right idea, and we can tweak it once it's generated. Taking a look at what it gives us, it's not bad. I can at least tell it's trying to make the picture I gave it, and even invented a new Northern Europe since I didn't use a square canvas. Honestly, it has some potential, and I'll give it a thumbs up, though the editor as a whole is functionally unusable in my opinion for the majority of players. Related to that, there's also now a built-in way to access mods, including maps, alternate game modes, and tuning packs, which allow for everything from quality of life fixes to crazy mechanic overhauls. Again, like a lot of things in the game though, there's definitely still some work to be done. Its sorting system, for example, has 4 options. First, you can sort by the most recently uploaded, which, due to a limited number being shown, only gives mods uploaded in about the last week. Second, you can sort by rating, which at first sounds promising, but you can see here the number 1 entry is Test001, which has 1 5-star rating. So it's not presenting popular mods, but just ones with the highest average, in no obvious order. Third, and probably the silliest, is you can sort alphabetically, which in this case doesn't even make it down to the letter A. Finally, you can sort by date updated, which, just like date uploaded, really only goes back a few days. Whether they didn't think of or didn't get around to a popularity sort makes this, I think, a lot less useful than it will be down the road. Even just a simple sort by total downloads like it is in H2 would make finding good mods much easier, but the point is at least mods and a content editor are technically in the game. Number 8 is the number of alerts has been cut down. If you're like me and we're missing events happening around the map, or even your landmarks being destroyed in a game I don't want to talk about, this is great news. They do seem to get it in the description of the problem that important notifications were being missed by players because of all the text, sounds, and red circles popping up on the map. I think they could go even further and take away the ally under attack ping, but this is definitely a good start. This is a look at the minimap in real time from the perspective of Blue while being rated prior to the new change, and you can see there's a lot of red circles. Throw in an ally being attacked and a sacred site being taken, and very quickly it's obvious you can't jump around the map fast enough to check on all of these notifications, and it's one of those situations where less is more. For number 9, I'll group a bunch of little UI changes. As 2 obvious examples, they now have a global queue, and they've done a much more sensible thing with the Chinese dynasty icon than having it in the middle of the screen for anyone to accidentally click on. There's probably a lot of other little things I'm forgetting, but the UI overall is just a little nicer in some small ways. Finally, with number 10, I won't go into all the details as it would take literally hours, but suffice to say there's been tons of changes to units and civilization since the early days. As just one example, Siege is being completely overhauled to the point that torches aren't going to be used against them anymore, and every civilization is also of course receiving balance changes on top of what they've already had over the last few months, which is truly too many to list. It's hard to even say which civilizations are going to be stronger or weaker with all of the cross interactions. I have to say, overall they've actually done a good job with balance so far, at least in terms of parity between civilizations. Also, I have to shout out the website AoE4world.com, which is absolutely crushing it with everything from constantly updated win rates, unit building and tech stats, along with organizing a bunch of really useful external tools for build orders and lots more. They're going to have a ton of work ahead updating things with all the changes, but it's an insanely good resource for people trying to keep up with the game. Getting back to AoE4 though, of course there's still a long list of bugs they're working on and tracking, and like I said, even some added features that are, in my opinion, still not quite there. An interesting question to pose then is what if AoE4 had been released in this state, as opposed to what it was like last October? Honestly, I think it still would receive criticism for being unfinished, or at least unpolished. I suspect though it would have held on to a lot more of its initial hype, and it really is a shame they didn't delay it by a year. It's hard to say if the pace of development would have sped up or slowed down because of all the extra feedback they received, or if all of these things were already on their to-do list. One thing I find interesting is the graphic style doesn't really come up these days. Thinking back to where we were a year ago, it was really all that was discussed around the game. It's funny to look back at the old trailers and how disconnected it all seems to the discussions that are going on now. That'll do it for this one though, and I hope this comes across as fair to the game, as I genuinely think they've made some solid progress. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.